Welcome back, my friends. Currently, we're on day 288 of Russia's disastrous invasion of Ukraine, and I'm still not feeling 100%. So, in today's video, you won't see my face in the lower right hand corner. Hopefully, in 2 days, I'll be feeling better and you all can see my smiling face again. I appreciate all the comments of support that I've received, and I hope everyone stays healthy this holiday season. The first thing we should talk about is a follow-up from our last video in which we talked about these Soviet-era jet drones that the Ukrainians have built in order to strike Russian bomber bases hundreds of kilometers inside of Russia. And I didn't catch it in my video 2 days ago, but it's not a coincidence that this story from the Wall Street Journal also broke on the same day. The United States altered HIMARS rocket launchers to keep Ukraine from firing missiles into Russia. So this is not a coincidence that this story was leaked to the Wall Street Journal on the exact same day that Ukraine got this new capability to strike deep into Russia. So what this tells me is that the Ukrainians and the Americans are talking very closely. And Ukraine told the Americans that they had these Soviet-era jet drones that they had converted. They were going to attack these bomber bases deep into Russia. So what must have happened is someone at the Pentagon went to the Wall Street Journal and leaked. I mean, it's not really a leak if it's intentional, but told the Wall Street Journal to run this story that the HIMARS launchers that the Americans have given the Ukrainians were restricted so that missiles could not be fired from them deep into Russia. So this is pretty fascinating. There's kind of this 3D chess game going on between the Americans and the Russians where America is fine with this. Here's a tweet I want to share with you. The United States will not interfere with Ukraine to develop its own weapons potential for long-distance strikes inside of Russia. This is according to U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. So more than likely, the United States is even helping the Ukrainians with parts and components, maybe some expertise, how to develop their own kamikaze drones, their own long-distance strike capability. It just can't be the United States or NATO members giving the Ukrainians a large-scale capability to go after Russian targets deep within their territory. But if Ukraine is developing their own kamikaze drones or capabilities, Russia really has no one to blame but themselves for starting this war with Ukraine. So I think more of these strikes and attacks are going to be coming. If Ukraine can even produce a couple of these jet drones a week, this opens up lots of possibilities and is a nightmare for Russian strategists to defend against. And it's already happened again 2 days ago. A Russian airfield in Kursk was set ablaze by an apparent Ukrainian drone strike. So here is where this occurred. This is much closer to Ukrainian territory. So this is in the Kursk region, only about maybe less than 100 kilometers from the city of Sumy. There are satellite pictures of the damage. It does look like the drone smashed into an oil tanker. If you go on YouTube, you can search Kursk Air Base fire and you can see the video of this fire raging at the oil tanker. I'm not going to play the video, but you can find it if you want to watch it yourself. So big picture, what this tells me, what this shows me is that the Russian military is incompetent. Nothing about what they're doing going after Ukrainians' civilian energy infrastructure really makes any sense to me. It reeks of desperation. And the reason why is their most recent wave of cruise missiles, they launched about 70 of them, 60 of them were successfully intercepted. So all these long-range cruise missiles, which are Russia's best, all of them each costing potentially millions of dollars, their failure rate in not hitting their targets now is close to 90%. So to me, it would make more sense if Russia used their long-range precision weapons to actually go after valid military targets, which would be Ukraine's recently gifted air defense systems. The fact that Russia has now launched 4 of these attack waves and they're not even bothering to target Ukraine's air defense systems tells me that Russia has no confidence they can actually destroy them. If Russia were to, instead of attacking, public parks and glass bridges and schools, if they use these missiles to go after Ukraine's air defense systems, then in a future wave of attacks, their success rate might be 90% of their missiles being launched. The fact that they're ignoring Ukraine's air defense systems tells me they don't think that they can destroy them. They don't have the intelligence where they're located, and if they were to fire their cruise missiles at them, they would just be intercepted and shot down. So out of desperation, Russia is just blanket firing and coordinated attacks, hoping to overcome and confuse and overwhelm Ukraine's new air defense systems to hopefully strike at civilian infrastructure, civilian energy nodes. This isn't going to work, and I think Russia will abandon this grand strategy probably some point this month. So here's the war map on deepstatemap.live that everyone checks every day, and for the last couple weeks there hasn't been much movement. This is muddy season in Ukraine. It's very hard to conduct offensive operations when mud is everywhere. But as the ground starts to freeze, it'll be easier to move heavier equipment. So on my channel, this is the war map that I personally like to check every day. This is the price of crude oil in US dollars. This is the West Texas Intermediate price. I know for a lot of people, they would prefer that I show Brent. This is what is traded in Europe and traded in the North Sea. But the price of energy has been collapsing the last couple days. So if we just rewind and think about the last year, the price of Brent was at $93 a barrel prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It then spiked to 127 in response to the war. It then kind of settled down, but you could see the trend was still up. And the price of energy, the price of oil, peaked on June 7th at $123 a barrel. This is the max price, the max profit that Russia is getting for their energy exports. And the price of oil has been collapsing ever since, down to $76 a barrel. This is basically a 52-week low for the price of oil, the price of energy. Why is this happening? And it's because the U.S. Federal Reserve and central banks around the world are raising interest rates to get inflation under control. When we talk about the price of oil, everyone is focused on supply, drill more, open up more refineries. But something intangible that people don't consider is demand. If demand for a product or service falls, then the price will fall. So by raising central bank interest rates, it becomes more expensive and more difficult to borrow money. If people are borrowing less money, they're spending less money. By spending less money, you slow down global consumer demand for energy. So more than likely, this is triggering a global recession. Europe is going into recession. Asia is going into recession. North America is going into recession. And this is causing the price of oil, the demand for oil, to fall, hence the price going down. And it's even worse for Russia. So here is the price of Ural's oil. Their oil is a lower quality that is harder to refine, so it trades at a discount to WTI and ICE Brent. But look what's happened to Russia's oil exports the last month. Just a month ago, on November 7th, Putin was getting $81 a barrel for his exports, and today it's only 54. Part of this is, yes, energy demand is falling as we head into a global recession, but it probably also has to do with the oil price cap agreed upon by the EU, G7, and Australia. I didn't do a good job explaining this in my last video, so let's read a couple paragraphs together so you better understand how this oil price cap works. The price cap means only oil sold at a price equal to or less than $60 per barrel can continue to be delivered. Companies based in the EU, G7, and Australia will be banned from providing services enabling maritime transport, such as insurance, with oil above that price. The G7 nations, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US, provide insurance services for 90% of the world's cargo, and the EU is a major player in sea freight. So without a shipping container or a tanker being insured, they can't dock at any ports. They can't go through the Turkish Straits. They can't go through the Suez Canal. It's too much of a risk, too much of a liability if it's not insured. So what can Russia do in response? And the only thing Russia can do is try and work with a different country, maybe India or China, to insure their tankers. The risk would then be on India and China, and it would clearly look like India and China are helping Russia avoid these sanctions. Or Russia can just say screw it and stop producing. They can temporarily stop exporting until they can figure out how to get around this price cap. But if Russia stops producing, this would be disastrous for them. And Peter Zion is going to explain exactly why. Let's watch about 1 minute of this clip explaining the consequences for Russia if they stop pumping in the Urals.
Now, if this cap goes wrong, and the Russians decide that they're not going to produce at a price that they cannot influence, much less control, then what would happen is pressure would build up in the pipes all the way back up to the wellheads, and since this is in permafrost, when the oil stops flowing in permafrost, it turns to gel, becomes a plug in the pipeline, and the water that comes up as a byproduct freezes into ice, and when water freezes, it cracks the pipe from the inside, and it takes years, if not decades, to repair that sort of system. The last time this happened at scale, it was 1992, and in 1992, everything went offline, and it took the Russians 30 years to repair the damage. Only most of the repair work was not done by the Russians. It was done by oil services firms, and they are no longer operating in Russia for the most part.
So if Russia stops pumping, then the oil wells will freeze and crack the pipes, making all of the infrastructure worthless. Russia would have to re-drill these pipes to fix them, and they don't have the Western technicians or Western partners like ExxonMobil or Chevron to help them do it. They're incapable of doing it themselves. So I'm sure NATO is well aware of this fact that if they can lower this price cap, currently at $60, if this $60 level can legally and diplomatically hold amongst the G7, EU, and Australia, Russia's screwed because a month from now, 2 months from now, they can lower this to 50, they can lower this to 45, and eventually Russia's just going to have to stop pumping. And if they stop pumping, everything is going to break within their system. So there is a serious existential and logistical and every other way you want to figure it threat to the entire Russian Federation. And they're actually openly talking about this on Russian state TV. 3 months ago, I showed a clip of this commentator who was saying Russia either had to announce a large-scale mobilization or give up on the war. That was a controversial thing for this pundit to say. So let's watch another clip, and he makes a pretty good argument about the huge flaw in Russia's justification for this war.
Ой, к сожалению, риски распада Российской Федерации резко выросли с началом этой спецоперации по двум причинам. Первая заключается в том, что само идеологическое обоснование вот насчет того, что в Украине там русские на самом деле один народ, и поэтому там должна быть Россия как государство, само это обоснование подрывает основы государственности Российской Федерации. Потому что это означает, что тогда непонятно, почему под государством России живут там татары, чеченцы и так далее. Если Россия везде, где русские, да, это одна история.
Борис Борисович, вы правы.
Россия, там это другая история.
Не будите в Каченко
Не будите лихо, и все будет нормально. Дальше. Государства распадаются не в силу того, что какие-то группы там собираются, что-то там излагают такое, да, достаточно действительно маргинально, это трудно не согласиться, пока, да. Я потом отдельно скажу про маргинальные группы. Вот, государства распадаются из-за катастрофических ошибок собственного руководства государства. Вот от этого они реально и распадаются.
So what this commentator is arguing is that it is a huge mistake for the Russian state to be taking the position that, hey, if there are ethnic Russians in this other country, it is the obligation and right of the Russian state to attack that country in order to annex that land and absorb those people. It's a mistake for the Russian Federation, which is a multi-ethnic, multicultural country and society, to be equating the Russian ethnicity with the Russian state. That is what Putin has done by invading Ukraine, claiming that there are ethnic Russians here, therefore it is okay for the Russian state to go in, protect them, absorb them, make them one again. The reason why is, inside Russia, there are lots of people who are not ethnic Russians, the Tartars, the Chechens, and if they feel like they're not living in a pluralistic society, a multi-ethnic federation, then they're just going to rebel. They're just going to say, if the Russian ethnicity and the Russian state are one and the same, we don't belong inside this country. It's a dangerous thing that Putin has done by invading Ukraine and using this argument of ethno-nationalism. So Russia is losing, and Russia is doing everything they can to freeze the war in order to conscript another couple 100,000 soldiers, ramp up domestic production of weapons and materials. And of course, NATO is well aware of what Russia wants and Russia is trying to do, so that is why the Russians keep talking about peace talks and negotiations, and they want a ceasefire in order to peacefully resolve their differences. But this is a red herring. Here is the Foreign Minister of Sweden, Tobias Billström, and he's going to explain why it's a mistake for NATO members to be arguing that Ukraine needs to go to the negotiating table or engage in good faith with peace talks with Vladimir Putin.
I want to be clear. Russia does not succeed. Messages from partners that Ukraine needs to engage in negotiations risk reinforcing Mr. Putin's conviction that time is on his side and therefore prolong the war. Whether to negotiate with Russia or not, and if so, about what, is for Kiev to decide. And to support Kiev in this endeavor is not only a moral obligation, it is also the precondition for a lasting peace in Europe. We must stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Very well said, and he's absolutely correct. Engaging in peace talks or negotiations while halting military operations on the battlefield, this just gives Russia time when Russia's all in on attacking Ukraine. Russia will not stop this war until they're thoroughly defeated on the battlefield. So what does Ukraine need? They need guns, lots of guns, more weapons. Here's an interesting article spurred by Ukraine. Massive munitions restocking plan in proposed Pentagon budget. The bill would replenish supplies of HIMARS, Stingers, Javelins, and other items sent to Ukraine and stock up for future wars. Look at these insane numbers. The fiscal year 2023, this is the United States, National Defense Authorization Act gives the DoD permission to begin buying under multi-year contracts all of this stuff. 864,000 155 millimeter artillery rounds, 12,000 Excalibur rounds, 12,000 joint air-to-ground missiles. This is Stingers. 700 launchers. This is trucks. The United States already has lots of HIMARS launchers, but they want 700 more. 1,700 ATACMS missiles. And here's the big one. 106,000 Gimler rounds. Gimlers are what the United States has been providing to Ukraine these last 5 months, which has absolutely devastated all of the Russian forces. And if I can remember these numbers correctly, I think the Pentagon has only ever ordered from Lockheed Martin about 50,000 of these Gimlers over the last 30 years. In America's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, they used up about 20,000 of them. So from our existing stockpile, when I did the math back in July or August, I predicted that the United States would supply Ukraine with about 10,000 of these Gimlers over the next 6 or 7 months. So here we are, with the United States now ordering an additional 106,000 of these Gimler rockets from Lockheed Martin. Next big story we should quick talk about is that President Zelensky and the Spirit of Ukraine was named Person of the Year. I couldn't imagine anyone else being selected. This is absolutely the right choice. And before I get the comments, people love mentioning these facts, but Time Person of the Year is not who is the best person in the world. It's who's the most influential person in the world that year. So Adolf Hitler won in 1938, Stalin won in 1939, Churchill won in 1940, Roosevelt won in 1941, Stalin won again in 1942. And if we zoom to the more modern era, we can see who won in 2007. It was Vladimir Putin. Look at that. Obama won in 2008. Let's go to the most recent years. We have Joe Biden winning in 2020, Elon Musk winning in 2021, and here's President Zelensky taking his place in history. People 100 years from now will see this Wikipedia page and see his name and picture and remember everything that Ukraine accomplished this year. So what is Russia's response to President Zelensky being named Time Person of the Year? And on Russian state TV, they're debating, is President Zelensky the Antichrist or just a lesser demon serving Satan? So let's watch this together.
Хочу продолжить эту тему болезненную, очень такую религиозную, психологическую, народную тему, да, и надо акценты ставить конкретно и не стесняться. Я думаю, православная церковь должна провозгласить Зеленского как официально приход Антихриста. Официального Антихриста. Этот человек с точки зрения православия, это классический антихрист. Мы должны забыть фамилию Зеленский. Надо называть просто Зеленский это антихрист, и ее действия, и фактически, и там...
Russia's insane. Like, where do you go from here? If you have the official Russian Orthodox Church declare President Zelensky as the Antichrist, how do you ratchet it up from there, 2 or 3 months from now to keep your audience engaged? This is the level of discourse occurring nightly on Russian state TV, and all of these people are living in their own fantasy world. President Zelensky this week visited soldiers on the front lines in the Donbas region. There was this rumor that Putin might visit soldiers in the Donbas region, so Zelensky decided to one-up him and just go there first. And Zelensky visited the city of Sloviansk. I'm sure at this point Sloviansk and Kramatorsk are basically fortress cities. And here is the most recent military map from militaryland.net. You can see that Zelensky was about 40 or 50 kilometers from Bakhmut, which is right on the front lines. Zelensky, while visiting the front lines, took lots of pictures and videos. Here's him in front of a city sign so that his people know that, unlike Putin, it's the real guy in the real spots, meeting with real soldiers and real frontline workers fighting this war to protect and defend Ukraine. The final clip I have for you is of President Zelensky visiting wounded warriors in a hospital in Kyiv. He went there right after returning from Sloviansk, and he frequently goes to the hospitals to visit with wounded soldiers in order to thank them and present them with awards. Let's watch about a minute and a half of this together.
Збройних сил України. Дякую вам за все, що ви робите, як захищаєте нашу державу. Сьогодні наприкінці дня тільки спробую заїхати до вас, але з великою честю хочу вас привітати, подякувати всім. Вже краще.
Надіюсь, що все добре. Вернемося далі, будемо захищати.
Дякую вам за службу.
Дякую вам за задачу. Велике дякую.
Будемо бігати.
Да, сказал даже Мосquitoes, бігати, все як положено.
Дякую. Thank you so much. Bravery. Great honor. Thank you so much. Як ви себе почуваєте? Дякую. Це залежить. Там люди герої вже виживали.
Да, в таких більш складних умовах. Так що, я думаю, програємося. Дякую.
That's all for this update video. Glory to the heroes, glory to Ukraine. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support my channel. Comments or questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, take care, be safe.